we need to invest in people so they can invest and fund these projects. Things that they believe in, things that take risks. And for us as filmmakers, we have to double down, take those risks, show people why you need to be the one that makes this story. That this story is about the most vulnerable part of you, and that you don't, the part that you want to hide the most, that you like typically want to brush under the carpet. Don't do that.
My first question for each of you: what initially drew you to storytelling and filmmaking, and did you envision that you would use this art form to make an impact or a change? Andrew, I'll start with you.
Okay. What drew me? I think just watching stories and having them transform me, like starting when I was a kid. Just the magic, the movie magic of cinema is something that everyone probably in this room can say, what was that first film that really just transformed you, that your eyes went wide and you saw the world differently? And, you know, it wasn't necessarily a social impact film for me, but I remember when I was probably in my early teens seeing like Memento for the first time, Christopher Nolan's film, and just seeing a story just make me question so many things, just the way that that story was told, and wanting to read the script and realizing what goes on to put these stories forward really just made me want to lean in more. I mean, at the time I was doing school plays, and that's when I started to find this early introduction into the arts, but it was seeing a film like that that was so transformative to want to know more of this particular medium, and just over time just seeing the questions that it can create and the audience that it can reach on a larger scale just made me want to lean in. And so when I got to a place of applying to schools, my parents were smart enough or dumb enough to say you can apply to one film school. Otherwise, you're going to have to go get a real education. Well, joke's on them. I got into NYU. And so it was just the most amazing opportunity to be surrounded by people that were also, you know, impelled to tell and want to make these stories. And some of them changed the world by making stories. So it started just by seeing that spark on a screen and wanting to do something similar.
Sam, what about you?
My journey is like the antithesis of Andrew's. I am an Iranian Hoosier living in Indiana, so I thought I was going to be in the NBA. I'm like 6'3", 6'4". So when that didn't happen, I was like, all right, like what can I do with my time? So my dad worked at IU. He used to bring home like computers and cameras and stuff, and I used to play around with that. And then eventually I joined the school newspaper my senior year of high school. I started doing like journalistic pieces. By the time I was like 18, 19, and developed into like music videos. I applied to only one art school. It was Columbia College in Chicago. I think it was like $40 a year. I could not afford that, so I went to IU. I failed the only video class I took in college, and then they actually brought me back to be an adjunct 2 semesters ago, and I told the students, I was like, guys, you don't really need this. Like, just go make stuff. So then, yeah, I mean, I made my debut feature, Greener Pastures, when I was 24. I was telling everybody in the green room I was shooting weddings. I was shooting sorority videos. I was trying to make ends meet, living on a $20,000 grant for the first 14 months of shooting. And during that whole process, like, you just keep telling yourself, just keep going. This is going to pay off, even though I'm putting 80,000 miles on my Honda Accord between 6 states with a bag of almonds and then riding shotgun with me. So, I mean, you just keep going and affirming things happen along the way. But as long as you just trust yourself and you just believe in the project, believe in yourself, it usually tends to pan out. And, you know, it's an absolute blessing and a miracle to, you know, be in this position, speaking in a situation like this and being able to just share the story. It's just, yeah, it's really full circle. And that's my journey, I'd say. That's probably the reason why I got into film and storytelling.
And Shoshannah, what about you?
I've always loved films, always just like growing up before closed captioning was a law, like we would get reels, like, you know, like we'd get them all, like we'd get old style projector films, like the old film canisters, whatever, and we project them onto the wall of our rooms in our house. And so like those old films that had the subtitles on them. So it was always like that love of film that I could imagine myself in a film. I'm sure everybody here in this room imagined themselves in a film. And so when Marlee Matlin won her Oscar, I remember seeing that. That was like the first time I saw another deaf person on screen. And that was really, like it was pivotal. Like I'm not kidding, it changed my life. And my whole family is deaf like I am. And so I didn't realize before that moment that every time I imagined myself in films or in stories, I imagined myself as a hearing person. Like I didn't see myself signing. I saw myself speaking because that's what I saw on screen. And so after that moment, it was just like I wanted to act. I wanted to do what she was doing. And I was lucky enough to where like somehow it happened for me. But then I realized that once I got on set and I got these scripts, I got these stories, I was like, oh, wait, they're written by people who are outside my lived experience. So really, this story is not always my story or my experience. It's about how those kinds of people see people like me, right? So sometimes it's hard for me to find the truth in that. So like I believed that acting was about truth. And then yet if the story is not based in truth, in the truth of my experience, then how can I bring truth to the role? So I thought, okay, I'm gonna start writing. That's the solution, right? I'm gonna start writing. And I was lucky enough to make that happen. And then I realized that, okay, wait, hold on. So really, it's directing. Like really, the directors execute the story that's on the page. So then when PBS approached Marlee about doing a documentary on her life, Marlee was like, okay, that's fine, but one condition. It has to be directed by a deaf woman. And for some reason, that was me. And so, so that's what I believe films can do. Like it can show that, like how I see the world, right?
Well, first of all, let's give a huge hand for the three of these incredible, incredible storytellers and their journeys. Sam, your work often intersects with social themes like isolation, health, and justice. What compels you to keep exploring these themes in your documentaries?
I don't think serendipitous is the right word, but that is a constant motif in the Midwest. There's a lot of disparities between the way people get their information, their news, food deserts, the list goes. It's a pretty vast list. So I think, like, I don't purposely, I mean, initially I wasn't purposely choosing those kind of stories, but in particular, like the last few projects I have worked on, yeah, I mean, they focus really at the intersection of like mental health, suicide in particular between Safe Place and Greener Pastures, and yeah, isolation and how people find solace in their relationships and their communities. And I think, I consider myself somewhat, I don't want to say like a lone wolf, but being in these kind of spaces it's really cool because we don't have this in Indiana, like this is, so like there's a part of me that's very nervous and anxious, but also the lone wolf aspects of me is like, man, I got to really go out and branch and make relationships. And it's actually one of my favorite things to do when I'm in these kind of spaces. But, with the people and the stories that I try to tell, I think there's a lot of beauty and there's a lot of things that resonate, not only for myself, but I think people that might maybe find themselves in the characters that they see on screen with those projects.
Let's play a clip from your film, Greener Pastures, which shows farming at the intersection of climate change, industrialization, globalization, and a growing mental health crisis.
The trouble with farming is the decisions are made with the heart instead of the head. Right now is a bad, bad time to be in the agriculture business.
Just because it's not winter does not mean that our farm families aren't questioning their future.
There's something going on with Mother Nature. I would actually call it climate shift.
It's messing with my livelihood. It's extremely stressful.
Factory farms are running family farmers out of business.
Family farms used to support their communities, and they are just not there anymore.
I'm going to have to sell the cows. It's either that or lose everything.
I've honestly had myself convinced that I'm no longer an alcoholic.
Really? How's that going for you?
We're not going away without a fight. We're hopeful.
We can win it.
I know we can.
Start fighting for sobriety. Fight for your life.
I am fighting for my life.
It's not easy to admit you need help.
So what do we need to do to change this? And then it dawned on me, I'm gonna have a nonprofit.
I look back on everything my parents have fought for. If we don't carry on, there would be a lot lost.
No, I think it'll all pan out just fine.
I'm seeing growth in you. I love it.
You know, we can't control the climate, we can't control the prices, but we can control our attitudes.
No matter how bad things are, we'll get through it. There's always room for miracles. You still got Mom and I. That's why you're a preacher. You preach at me all my life.
Absolutely beautiful. Obviously, there are a lot of socio-political elements to this project that ring true for many folks in this room and beyond. What initially drew you to this story, and what do you hope audiences take away from it now? And what did you learn along the way?
Yeah, what first initially drew me to the story is that, living in Indiana, there's cornfields in my backyard, and it's just a huge part of my identity, even though I don't have an ag background at all. So there was a story that came out. The CDC released a series of statistics that said that farmers and ag workers have the highest rate of suicide among any United States profession. NPR ran a story on it, and then I had a couple people in my ear kind of say, hey, like, you should do some research, look into this. And that, it's such a fine thing to look through, because, like, it's a very niche thing to find farmers and ag workers that not only are going to talk about mental health, they're going to have some kind of correlation to suicide. And so that was like kind of what I was going for. I probably spoke to over 100, 150 plus farmers over a 6-month period that not only would be open to discussing mental health and suicide, but like they either had like a suicide attempt themselves, or they were battling with suicide with ideation, or a family member had died by suicide. So that's the correlation with all the characters there, is that they either had an attempt or one of their parents or family members had died by suicide. And so in particular, that's kind of how the project started. And then once the development happened, started shooting, and then started getting some money. And then I think by the time it was all said and done, it really kind of developed into something much, much bigger than just mental health, when, the tariffs and the trade war was going on, in particular with China and Mexico. And so, like, the farmers in this film, they were, what you see an operation where the guy loses his, I guess I don't want to do any spoilers, but pretty much at the end of it all, you find out that a lot of it's based on the mental health elements, and so many things are out of their control with climate change. El Derecho had happened in 2019. 2018 and 2019 were the wettest years on record in the United States. And so you saw Jeff, who was harvesting corn and soybeans in December with snow on the ground. Like, that never happened. So I think there was a lot of things that we were able to capture. And when it was all said and done, I think just having an appreciation for local farms, being able to go to farmers markets, buying and shopping as local as much as possible. And that's probably the biggest thing I took away. And honestly, participating in municipal elections and trying to just really have a voice when it comes to policymakers. And Chris is a really big advocate, as you saw the relationships he had in the film. And that went down from municipal all the way to national, as, we saw things with local policymakers in Iowa, and then, Bernie and Obama and Clinton's and stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a crazy experience.
And do you hope audiences take away the same sort of calls to action to get involved locally?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I always really think about is when you go into the grocery store and just pick something up, you kind of just are like, wow, like, now you kind of have an appreciation where that actually comes from. It's not just like a tangible thought that you're just like, oh, I'm gonna go get my eggs, like, go get my honey. Like, now you can actually have some empathy about where it came from, the individual that busted their blood, sweat, and tears to get this out there, and yeah, shopping local and just being participatory in your community, for sure.
In spite of all of these challenges, the film also manages to show the perseverance and the resilience of these families trying to find solutions. How important was it for you that while showing the impact of all these factors colliding in their lives, the film also provided some pathway forward? How did you try to achieve that?
Well, this is like a room that wants answers, right? I mean, the biggest thing that you got to know is you got to please your funders. So, you can make a film that's like very doom and gloom and dark and stuff, and may not even sell. Like, thank God PBS and Independent Lens and ITVS, because that's who acquired the film. Obviously beautiful, amazing partners they were. But in particular, while making this, shooting it, editing samples, editing scenes, sending it to investors and funders, getting their opinion, a lot of them just kept saying, like, man, this is like really, it's just like sad. Like, who's going to sit and watch this for this long? And so, like, we, as a director, it was kind of the first time really ever thinking about directing like nonfiction. Like, you think about a doc, you just kind of put a camera in front of people and their lives just unfold, and that's what happens. But like, a lot of directing went into play. I mean, I was having characters do particular things. Like, one of the one of the characters like ran for office because I thought that'd be a really great idea also for her. And it was a really beautiful story because Chris had never run for office, but he had this long line of advocacy. And so his daughter doing it was a really cool, like passing of this torch moment that she's doing something he never did. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like tried to instill hopes of optimism because a lot of the feedback that we got too was really funny going to festivals and you know, reading IMDb and Letterboxd reviews. People are like, man, it just seems so sad the whole time and all of a sudden things are great. Like, how does that happen? But I mean, you just try to you try to tell a story of optimism and hope, of course. And there are moments of hope everywhere. It just really depends on your perspective and your POV of how you approach the story.
Remember this point, because we're going to come back to this when it comes to the actual pitching and selling projects that have impact at its root. For folks who don't know, I used to work at Participant, so very familiar with.
Yeah,
stories.
you guys were there at the Doc Society pitch where actually I got my bit of money in 2019. So yeah, I remember you weren't there, but there was another woman there.
Yeah, lots to come back to. Shoshannah, I'd like to go to you and play a clip from your project, Marlee Matlin, Not Alone Anymore.
Delta camera, mark.
Marlee Matlin's career has spanned dozens of film and TV projects since she became the youngest person to win a Best Actress Academy Award.
A pioneer representing deaf actors in Hollywood.
Hi, my name is Marlee Matlin.
The movie Children of a Lesser God is generating a lot of buzz, including a Best Actress nomination for newcomer Marlee Matlin.
I remember that my heart started pounding the minute I saw her.
Do you feel that you might be a sentimental favorite?
I'm Master Robert 12, and I'm 58, so how lucky is that? I don't know, man.
I don't either, because you know I'm in the bottom 3% academically.
It's not. She was brilliant and she was hilarious.
I hope you realize you are more than what people think you are. Be the difference and be loud.
Shoshannah, your film is centered around Marlee Matlin, obviously a groundbreaking figure in the deaf community. What responsibility did you feel in representing her story, not just as an icon, but as a human being who has faced deep personal challenges?
I didn't see that as a challenge per se. Like, I knew everybody else would. But I wanted to make sure that I refused to use the word challenge. I wanted to say it was an opportunity. An opportunity, like we had an opportunity to really reframe this documentary, to bring an audience in to her experience as a human being, how she experiences the world. When you watch the film, you're going to have to depend on closed captioning. All of you will have to rely on closed captioning. And that is how it is for her and for me and for all deaf people. And so this is, as a first-time director, I've never directed anything before in my life. Like, I've never directed a documentary. And I knew that other people would see that as a challenge for me as well. So again, I decided, okay, what opportunities do I have? What do I understand about how we move through this world? And how can I use that knowledge to center the film? And so I really felt like people really wouldn't be able to understand Marlee, the actress, Marlee, the human being, if they don't really understand like what it's like for all deaf people throughout the world. And I think to frame her experience in this way, like really all the archival that you see in this trailer is like, it's something that just lives in my mind. Like when I got this job, I could tell our archivist, I could say to the editor exactly the moments that I wanted, like what her hair looked like, what outfit she was wearing, because I was obsessed as a young deaf girl looking at all of these interviews. And so I can see the kinds of questions that she was asked, like the words that they use, like the responsibility that they put on this young woman, you know, for her, that it was her job to educate the world about what it was like to be a deaf person. Like, you know, from the beginning, for the 35 years of her career, she's had to do this over and over again. So I knew that I wanted to really just like flip the form of documentary, like use a split screen in this way so that we don't lose her face. We don't get rid of her. We don't use a voiceover. We got rid of that idea. We used creative captioning. Like we moved where the captioning was located on the screen, all to bring people into this experience so they could understand it. I think to frame her, it's a huge responsibility. It could be a burden per se, but we, you know, everyone always says, how did you overcome deafness? Like they'll say this to Marlee all the time, but it's not something you overcome, right? Like she shouldn't have to overcome this burden, you know, like why would she want to? But these are the questions that she's always framed. And so my hope has been that people in seeing this documentary, arguably the most famous deaf person in the whole wide world who lives on this earth, if this is what she experiences on a daily basis, what do you think it is like for every other deaf person throughout the world?
This sort of answers my next question. You kind of went there, but how did you think about how to build empathy, particularly among hearing audiences, for those who may not fully understand the lived experience of those who are deaf?
Like I've been in a writer's room before. Luckily, I've been in a writer's room before, and sometimes I'm the only deaf person in that room. And sometimes I'm the only woman, and sometimes the only like deaf woman in the room. So, and I think one question that I always feel like I have to ask is, what would deaf people learn from this story? And I think that is something truly that is like, it dumbfounds a lot of people when you ask that question, because I think the traditional assumption is that when you see somebody who is quote unquote different, whatever that means, whatever different means, that they are then there to educate the people who are not like them. And I mean, it's true for sure, that is important, but it's also like, okay, so I feel like this story can be for both parties, right? So I always want to make a film that people are going to learn something from. Like all people will learn something. Like they could be different things that they're learning, but they should be different things actually. But it's possible to make films for both parties. And so that's like my thesis going into the film.
Thank you. Andrew, let's play a clip from your project, Rosemead.
有什么想说的?
I heard you there in the hallway.
没有，我又不在学校了。
You were there, I heard you, and you were
我在
trying to...
店里工作。哎，儿子，你听妈咪，遇到什么不合理的，你要仔细想一想。 Joe?
This shook me the first time I saw it. Andrew, what initially drew you to this story?
So this story is based on an incredible LA Times article by Frank Chung that came out in about 2018. I still actually don't remember how I came across this article, if it was just simply like reading the news or my news feed, but I read the article and it does, I don't want to say spoil the film because it's based on a true story, but the title of the article was A Dying Mother's Plan. And I read it and it rattled me. And I've been producing since I went to film school. And so it's very hard sometimes to turn off your producer brain. So everything I watch, everything I read, everything I listen to, I'm thinking to myself, could this be a movie? This was not one of those occurrences. Is that I read this article about this mother and the choice that she makes, and it sat with me like this pit in my stomach, and then it grew. And I just found myself talking to people more and more about this article that I read. And it's about this Chinese immigrant mother, and I'm not part of the Asian American or the Asian diaspora. I'm not a parent. I'm not an immigrant. I'm none of these characteristics from this article, but this article really sat with me and I couldn't get away from it. And I would ask friends that are parents, that are from these communities, and said, what would you do in this position? What would you do if you were faced with this type of scenario? And the more and more that I talked about it, the more I realized I can't get away from this story, and I want to talk more about it. I want to create conversations, and so that is it. Coming back to your original question, like, this is the beauty of filmmaking and storytelling, is like we have an opportunity to amplify stories and amplify voices. And so after months of talking to people about this article that really rattled me, I finally reached out to Frank, the journalist, and I said, your story is incredible, and I think that there are so many themes and that need to be discussed on a wider scale. Can we talk? And so that began about a year-long process of trying to option it. And this is a story that is a labor of love. It took us 8 years to make, 16 different funders. I guess speaking to what this panel is all about, that it takes a village to tell these incredible types of stories. But it began with just feeling the need to tell this story. It wasn't that I wanted to tell this story. It wasn't like, great, let's go make a Liam Neeson action film. It was, this is a story that needs to be told. And I don't know anyone else that's going to do it, so I'm going to start the process.
Could you give us a couple of lines about the film? Because I know that obviously the trailer kind of hints at some of the themes, but yes, just curious if you can give us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, this story is about a Chinese immigrant mother whose own health is deteriorating and has ultimately an expiration date of, that she is timed with. And her son, they've lost the father a couple years before. The son's own mental health is beginning to deteriorate. And so the mother is faced with this Sophie's Choice type of decision of, what do I do when I'm gone? How do I protect the world from my son, or my son from the world? And so the story is about the relationship between this mother and son, and ultimately comes down to what is a very conflicted act of love.
And how did you and the team approach balancing the deep psychological drama here with the racial and socio-political commentary that the film explores?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really important that the film is as authentic. I mean, it is a scripted fictional film, even though it is inspired by true events. So it is not a documentary. There's a great Aaron Sorkin quote that I love that he says in terms of Social Network, is that a film is a painting, whereas a documentary is a photograph, is so that, you can see the brushstrokes. There are liberties taken for sure, but it was incredibly important at every single step that we surrounded ourselves with people that could allow this story to be as authentically portrayed as possible. So step one for me was partnering with a producer who I'd long admired and been wanting to work with, named Matlin, who's incredible. She's Chinese American, and she even said, she's like, "You optioned this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." She's like, "I read it and I thought it was an incredible story, but I was like, no one's going to make this movie." And I was like, well, let's be crazy together. And so we set out to then get to the next step, which is finding a writer. And we found this incredible, Minette knew her, this incredible Taiwanese American writer named Marilyn Fu, who actually was writing the first drafts of the script when she was 6 months pregnant with her first children. And so that just is another element of the way that this story started to compound, is like the idea of conflicted love for a mother being written by a soon-to-be mother. And then the next steps were finding our director. And to your question, it's so important to find someone that really could bring that type of nuance to understanding both of these characters. And we had a really, I guess, wide net that we cast to find our directors. And we interviewed people that were from, Asian American, Chinese American, Hong Kong American, Korean, Laotian, from mainland China, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan. And it was so fascinating just to hear what each person brought to the table in terms of what they thought about these characters from reading the article and from reading those first drafts of the script, in terms of their own cultural sort of placement for the way that they would approach it. And so when we ultimately sat down with Eric, it was his first feature as a director, even though he's an incredibly celebrated DP. He knew this story. He had a personal connection to it. He's actually he grew up near Rosemead in the San Gabriel Valley, where this story takes place. And so we knew that he understood who these characters were really at its core, to allow them to be approached, I think, with this care that's needed, so that this isn't a story about, it's not a black and white story. It is only shades of gray of the way that these characters live the final days of their lives.
Obviously, given the current news cycle and the political moment we're in, what do you hope audiences will take away from it? And did you go into making this project even thinking about impact as a potential sort of end goal?
Absolutely. The one word answer for what I hope people take away is conversation. We want people to talk about this story, because everyone will have a different opinion on it. We're not trying to change people's minds about certain elements, but obviously this film touches on mental health, on immigration, on gun violence, on so many different topics. But we think of this film, it can be seen certainly as somewhat bleak, but it's not. We want it to be more hopeful, in that this was a preventable story, that conversation and destigmatization of mental health could potentially have prevented. And we want people to see this and talk about that. Just like how I felt when I first read that article almost 8 years ago, is I just wanted to talk about it, to feel how I felt compared to someone else, and for that conversation to spark other conversations. So that's all we're really asking from this film, is for it to create opportunities for people that feel that they are living in situations that no one else would understand. That's how this mother and this son probably felt in this, small house in Rosemead, California, is that no one else would understand them. But it is so impactful when we play this film and we have screenings and people come up and say, I went through something like this. I have a relative, I have a close friend that has, that is dealing with mental health issues, and I don't know where to turn, but you have portrayed this in a way with dignity and with honesty that I want to now talk to them. And so that's what we hope. We hope people talk because of this film.
I think part of what all three of you talked about was obviously building empathy for your audience, but also balancing emotional resonance while still trying to create an entertaining piece of art. How do you think about that in filmmaking, and what do you hope that in your future projects you'll be able to take from the ones that you've worked on in the past? I will go with Sam first, and then whoever would like to answer.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that we're like filmmaking, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's art, it's an art form, and so like movies, like they have to entertain. So like bottom line is, if it's like this gut-wrenching, impact-driven film, people don't want to just come in and just get soaked with information, because they're going to walk out bored, overwhelmed, and it's not going to be like sticky to remember. So I think like the biggest thing that, everyone here, all three of us definitely keep in mind, is that when you tell a story, like it's got to be entertaining. And I know that, entertaining, it's an interesting word, because when you think about entertaining, it's subjective. It can go in a bunch of different directions. But like, in particular with Greener Pastures, like if you were to tell somebody, hey, I made a film about farmers and suicide, like they probably look at me like, that doesn't sound very, people would just be like, what? I don't want to watch that. It doesn't sound interesting. But, you have to make it entertaining. And the biggest thing is, at the epicenter of a wonderful story, it revolves around beautiful, rich, textured, and unique characters. And so that was the biggest thing when, I was trying to, kind of figure out which farmers would be the best for my story. Like, spoke to 100, 150 plus over this 6-month period. Like, they had to be captivating, interesting, unique, open to doing things, open to direction. And so that's the kind of stuff that it takes for an audience, a person, to sit and watch a topic that might not be as flashy as like a Marvel film or something, but like, you have to give your audience 90 minutes to live, love, laugh, and cry with these characters.
Shoshannah, what about you?
That's a really great question, truly. Like, I use that word a lot when I say I use resonance as a word a lot, because I think, again, I'm confronted with like what people think my truth is. Oftentimes they see my life as loss, hearing loss, this struggle to access sound. But that isn't the crux of it. Like, we need to reframe what that loss truly is, what that struggle is, and also fill in the joy. Like, I think that everyone's life is not a void, right? It's not just about the one thing, right? It's important for me to incorporate as many deaf people as I can, because when deaf people are together, their deafness is invisible. It's not even a thing. It's just, they laugh together, they make a lot of noise together, it's joy when they're together. There's no struggle to access language. So I wanted to include that joy in the film, not to erase the truth of like what it is like to navigate the world as a deaf person. It is a challenge in and of itself, but I think it is a challenge because people view it as something different than what it actually is. So I've always thought about giving your characters joy, whether it is through writing or acting or directing, but giving them that experience of joy so the audience experiences that same joy with that character, and then mirroring it with, the truth of what that person's life is, so that everyone has pain. But, what is your pain? What is my pain? That kind of thing. So what is your joy and what is my joy? And together they become resonant.
And Andrew, what about you, especially thinking about, obviously, your slate from docs to films? How do you sort of think about building emotional resonance across those two different formats?
I mean, I really love Shoshannah's answer. I think it comes down to like how we contextualize, and you could look at any of these stories and choose to see it in a singular way, like the word loss. Like I love what Shoshannah said about the idea that even calling it hearing loss. I think with a story like Rosemead, you could choose to view it as this singular story of a really horrendous act by a mother that is done in a vacuum, and yet we view this as a real story of love. And so I think that for me, at least when I'm choosing stories, whether that is docs or on the scripted side, it's finding stories that have this moral that I hope at least force, not force, but bring people to that point again of conversation, to question the world that they live in and to sort of go out and ask more questions. And so I think that's framing in a way. There's another documentary that I made this year. It's called The Last Guest of the Holloway Motel, which is about this man in his 70s who has basically run away from the life that he had built for himself up until something comes out that will change everything for him. And that's another story that you could singularly look at it as a story of loss. And the filmmakers chose to really focus on the beauty of what can be after this loss. And so that's really what it comes down for me. Like, I don't really have any intention of making stories that, as Sam was saying, like, that are singular in their approach, and that, like, if you're pitching to someone and saying this is a story about farmers that killed themselves, then yeah, that's a really tough pitch. And so I think it's finding the beauty. It's finding how do we contextualize in each of these stories that there is hope, there is joy, or at the very least that there is action that we can take in the world to make the world a little brighter.
I know I started this panel sort of talking about the notable decline that we've seen in the industry. But I think even beyond filmmaking itself, I think we've seen a decline in impact and all of the facets in which impact campaigns are built or impact-driven content is produced. Have you seen or felt this shift, and what do you think has contributed to it?
Participant going away. No, it's tough. I mean, that there is a gaping hole from one company alone, because you guys were the shining light of supporting stories that simply were stories that needed to be told, not stories that needed to be justified on a P&L sheet. And so, yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you pitch to buyers, and even with the most important stories, their question is like, "But where's the scandal?" And that's just true crime. Where's the scandal? Who's the celebrity behind it? It just shows the importance more than ever for people to unite and bring together people that want to talk and want to actually, push up stories that can make the world better, or at least create conversations to make the world better. I guess there's really impact partners is like the one that readily comes to mind of a company or a group of people that are funding these types of things, but it does take one person just to support that story that sort of builds that snowball effect. But it's tough. It is certainly tough out there, which comes back to your previous question of being able to, again, contextualize your story in a way that you can answer those questions to whether it's funders or buyers of who is my film for, who is going to see it, and more importantly, are they going to pay to see it, or will they then talk about it and tell other people to see it? And that's up to you as the filmmakers, as the people that these stories have captured the attention of how do you get more people to care about them. And so our work is certainly cut out for us. There are people that want to support the arts in the truest form. When I say the word art, not sort of the commerce of filmmaking. But we all got to stick together in order to do that.
Sam, Shoshannah?
Yeah, can you ask the question again?
Just in terms of there being a notable decline in impact or impact-driven stories, have you felt this shift? And if so, beyond participant maybe, what else do you think has contributed to it in the world?
Yeah, like contributed to impact, like who's funding those kind of projects and stuff? Or yeah. I mean, Greener Pastures was 100% raised by grants and donations through the wonderful folks of PBS, ITVS, Independent Lens, Catapult, which is based Catapult Development Film Fund based in San Francisco, and then Doc Society was probably they were probably also one of our really, really great funders. So I'd say those folks, including like the Redford Center. There's a lot of really great. I mean, I'm missing so many, I know, but those are the ones that were involved, that I've been involved with. And yeah, I mean, like Andrew said, I mean, if it's not true crime, not sports, not celebrity, not music, chances are it's kind of tricky to find a buyer or a home. Definitely landscape shifted a bit, but ultimately, it's easy to say like it comes down to the person, but like it's definitely like hard to make movies. It's hard to find a home for it, but like the beauty of it is that we have wonderful technology at our disposal now. That we have iPhones that shoot such high quality, and the internet is right in the palm of our hands. So I mean, it's easy to definitely get stories out there and tell these impact-driven films. And I think events like this, at least like over the last 5-6 years, I've been coming to events like this. I definitely like really am advantageous about finding the relationships, the partners, and the person that you might be sitting next to might be the next person that could help fund it or get it out the door. And so that's the biggest thing I always tell myself. And so like take advantage of these moments. I'm taking advantage of these moments. Like I'm meeting these two for the first time, which is cool. And so yeah, I mean, just cherish every moment and value every relationship.
And I guess in general, how would you, for the folks in the room, advise on how to approach investor or distributor conversations with content like this? That's obviously nuanced, that's deeply, especially in this moment, socially and politically resonant. There's a lot of themes that are always going to be relevant, but right now in this climate, how would you advise folks to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the partners that I just named, like the Catapults of the world, the Doc Societies of the world, like that's like probably the go-to group to probably start doing some Googling research on when their next cycle is open to apply for grants and stuff. The grant route is it's very competitive and it's a little slower. It takes 4 to 6 months to get that response back. they're getting hundreds of thousands of applications and they only pick 5 to 10 to 20. So standing out is difficult, and just also never be discouraged that if you don't get chosen, it's because your project. It's not the case. Like they're picking such a small marginal number. So like, we got rejected like several times. There's so many grants we applied for. So finding those kind of partners, Googling and just, telling relevant stories, timely stories also really helped too. Like in particular, like during Trump's first administration with the whole, the tariffs and the corn and soybean that was happening in Mexico and China, like that was a huge deal in 2017 and 2018. So I would say that probably helped definitely get the story out there.
Andrew, Shoshannah, what about you both?
I think one thing that maybe has made me different than most is that I've always been at risk, it's tempting right now to try to counteract or to make stories that are safe. Like it's very tempting. Stories that are easy to sell, like choosing those kinds of projects, that would be an easier route. And I don't have that option. So I think what we can do instead, especially today, what I think is really quite important, because I saw a quote from today that said, the opposite of politics is art. So I think, thank you for that. So what art needs is not to be safe, to just go take risks. And I think what investors really respond to, especially with me, has been, fortunately, with PBS, because American Masters approached Marlee, and then Marlee approached me. So my path wasn't really something that I don't think other people, I brought people, I want people to follow me, and I want people to follow my path, but my path, I think, is gone. Because PBS has a mandate to have nothing to do with us any longer, right? So that's why I'm like, okay, we're going to give you a chance to direct because a deaf woman asked another deaf woman to direct. And so with American Masters, they said, this documentary could be 10 minutes to 30 minutes to 90 minutes or whatever. Nobody expected me to make a 90-minute documentary, but I knew that I had to. So thanks to American Masters and Impact Partners specifically, who brought me on, and then I pitched to their investors, and they gave me the budget that I needed to make that 90-minute film. So truly, it was like our earliest funding, generous funders were just the Corporate for Public Broadcasting, which no longer exists anymore, right? So I am the first deaf person to direct a feature film by themselves. And the point of being the first, as Marlee has said, is to make sure that you build a pathway that other people can follow. But when CPB has been closed down, so where's the path now? Like the path has been erased, like it's gone. Which is, like, it's like, we need to invest in people so that they can invest and fund these projects. Things that they believe in, things that take risks. And for us as filmmakers, we have to double down, take those risks, show people why you need to be the one that makes this story. That this story is about the most vulnerable part of you, and that the part that you want to hide the most, that you typically want to brush under the carpet. Don't do that.
I know we have a lot of folks who have questions in the room as well, so I will ask one last question for all three of you. You all talked about the amazing partners that helped bring your stories to life. How would you advise the folks in this room who are interested in telling these types of stories to go about finding those right partners? And how important is it to find the right collaborators when trying to tell a story like the ones that you've shared today? Andrew, start with you.
Sure. As I mentioned before, we had 16 different financiers to will this into existence. It took us 8 years, through the pandemic, through actors' strikes and writers' strikes, scheduling issues like the film falling apart countless times. all it took was a couple people just staying by our sides and believing in what we were seeking to do. I mean, and by the way, you saw her up there. That's Lucy Liu, the incredible Lucy Liu. Like, you'd think that you have an actress of her caliber, is that all the doors open, and it just shows that it just takes tenacity to get any of these stories made, especially, a capital D drama sometimes. This is the burden to bear for all of us as filmmakers, is you have to be the most passionate person in the room, so that passion becomes intoxicating for you to then convince whoever you're pitching to, whether it's for 1% of the budget or for to write the entire check. And that's what it was for me and Minette over those many, many years. Lucy was in the room many times, same with Eric, is that we went and we would talk to anyone that would listen to us, that we could hopefully convince them why this story needed to be told. And we got so many no's. I mean, just even to get to 16, and whether it was someone saying, like, I'll write you a little check or a big check, we did everything that we could. And that's what it takes. That's what it takes these days. There's so many, hopefully there's more and more stories of people finding that good fortune of someone just believing and saying, I want to support you. And that's why, as Sam said, just look around the room and the relationships that you connect. You have no idea what someone might bring to the table that leads you to the next person, that leads you to the next person. That's what we had to do to create this film. And that just shows the power of impactful stories and storytelling generally, is that it unites people. And in as divisive a time as most people can remember, in the times we live in now, is that is the power of art and the power of storytelling, is that you might tell the same story to 100 different people and 99 of them might not get it, or they might not be inspired by it. It takes that one person that then brings in a whole other room of 100 people, and all you need is that one. And so that's what we found over and over and over again, is to get to that 16. It just started with one in that room of 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. And so I'm so proud that it took all of that, because then coming back to one of your earlier questions, like, we had the 16 right people that allowed us to make the film the way we needed to do it. They never said to us, well, can we make it more of a thriller? Can we do this? Can we do that? Lucy delivered this incredible performance. We have a first-time actor in the role of her son, Lawrence Shue, who's just unbelievable. So no one said, well, can you get the kid from that thing? No, they allowed us to do the story and tell the story in a way to actually have the deepest impact that I mean, I'm very biased, but yeah, to allow it to have the impact that I think that it can have. And so for that, we're just so grateful to the people, the organizations, the companies that stuck by us, that supported it from big to small. It took the whole village.
Shoshannah, what about you?
For me, frustration has always been fuel. Like, I grew up in a deaf family, and so I'm used to seeing so many people who have thought that, like, all the things that my parents could not do, that people think my parents couldn't drive, or that we couldn't read for some reason, or that we shouldn't try out for a traveling team because we didn't have soccer in my hometown, so I wanted to. I'll try out for the traveling team, and I don't think you should try out for the traveling team. So on every count, they're wrong, Mike. So I think, my response has been, oh, you think I can't do something? You think I shouldn't do something? Makes me just want to do it more. So that's where it's just, you'll say, oh, great, so you don't believe in me. Okay, great, thanks. Thanks for showing me why I don't want to work with you. Thank you. Next, so there's so many people that I've been approached with how I just want to. I know it's crazy, but I'll just I'm going to do this documentary. We're going to change the whole format. We're going to change form. We're going to use 4 cameras, and we're going to drop the curtain behind the camera, and we're going to split the screen. And of course, everybody's like, okay, Shoshannah, that's actually not how we do documentaries. Oh, thank you so much for your time. Next. Till we met somebody who was like, wow, that's really cool. That's inventive. Great. Let's do it. So just like was said, I think you find that one person that's right for you. It's like dating, right? You don't marry everybody you go on a date with, right? So you marry just that one person. But sometimes you marry 16 people in your case, but they're all right for the right reason.
Sam, what about you?
Yeah, this is like my favorite thing to talk about because this is what I told my students 2 semesters ago. Like, because I was trying to give them the most authentic experience. Because, like, for me, I made my first film. I was, I think, 23, so that was 8 years ago. I had left my job. I was working at the university library as a student technology supervisor, and I took out a Sallie Mae loan for $8,000. I actually just paid it off like last month, and that loan is actually what funded my capstone undergrad film. And it was the first time I ever made a film. It was the first time I ever went to festivals. And so just like this kind of experience, like I was meeting other filmmakers, I was talking to people, I was getting to know the ropes. And then like from that experience, from that moment on, like I understood the risks that go into filmmaking, into being an artist. And if everybody in this room can like accept that you can take loans out, you can be broke, you can scrape at the bucket for your next meal, you can really like live on the edge to do this, then you're all in the right place, because that's the thing that I really had to tell myself and come to when I took out that loan. I pressed a sign, and it was my sister actually co-signed on it. She was pretty upset. She said, "Did you pay that off yet?" And I was like, "Yeah, finally did." But and then from there, you know, in my mid-20s to late 20s, I just kept trying to do little shorts. I kept trying to go to festivals, and that's when I started working on Greener Pastures. And then, yeah, I got that $20,000 grant. I lived off that for a year. I was filming sorority videos. I was filming weddings. I finally got to my pitch, and that's where Participant was at. And, you know, thank goodness I met David and Linda Cornfield, EPs of Porcelain War, Sugarcane. I mean, they're a wonderful, wonderful group of individuals. And they saw what they saw in Greener Pastures in my pitch. And then from there, they supported the project, and I was able to get it to the finish line. And then I just kept building my relationship network and coming to as many things like this, and just kept making work. Like when I started making Greener Pastures, I had a short that I sold to NBC around 2019, 2020, kept the momentum going. I worked on another short. I sold that to the New York Times, and now I'm about to have another short. So the biggest thing too I can say is, if you're working on one thing, just try to have like 10 things in the Rolodex ready to go, because that's the one thing that funders and investors really love, because a lot of my relationships now, they really like to invest in the person really more than anything, just because they kind of look at you as just a person they want to build with, they want to grow with. And so if you can have multiple projects at multiple stages, that's also a really big benefit. But biggest thing really I can say, putting the mic down, is just be prepared to take risks, and that's the biggest thing. And burned 100,000 miles on my Honda Accord, driving to Jeff's farm while he was Santa Claus, and being in the tundra of -30 when Juliet's trying to milk her cows and all that stuff. You just think in the back of your mind, I hope this pays off. And it brought me to a stage to tell that experience, so I think it did.
I wanted to thank you all for coming here to listen to these 3 incredible filmmakers share more about their stories and their journeys. I'm sure they will be around over the course of today or tomorrow, and I hope you all enjoy your time here at the forum. Thank you so much.
So the question was how Lucy became attached to the project, to Rosemead. You know, we were really fortunate. We didn't have the financing when Lucy came on board. What ultimately worked in our favor is that this was inspired by true events. So we had this incredible article, and we had the script. The unfortunate reality of the marketplace is that there are very few women that could play this role that are, you know, bona fide stars, and Lucy is in so many ways like one of one. And so we really took our shot, is that we went to her agents and were able to get them to read the script. There was an incredible agent named Sarah Kelly who read it and said, "This is awesome, let me send it to our point person." And they read it, and they said, "This is really special." And what wasn't special was how much we could offer her. But Lucy just knew that this was something that was a story that she needed to tell. And that's what this has been, even whether it's funders or Lucy. Every single person, there was some spark of that inspiration of why they needed to be part of the team to tell this story. So we got so lucky. She's been amazing from the whole time. You know, Manette and I produced it alongside Lucy, and so she is the best advocate for this film and getting its message out there.
So with nonfiction, like at my scale, it was like super grassroots, super small, independent. We raised everything with grants and donations through like a fiscal sponsor like Film Independent. So basically, you get an individual to, send a tax deductible investment donation, and then, you get that. So with our PBS, Independent Lens, ITVS deal, we didn't owe anybody. So technically, between what we raised and then what we got, we actually more than broke even, and now we're profiting through like Amazon Prime and all the distributors. So yeah, I'd say we're in the green.
Shoshannah, what about you? And then Andrew.
So this is the first time that I've directed a documentary. And before I was working on scripts and stuff. So this is getting the money back to investors with a documentary like Sam had mentioned. We both worked on projects through PBS. So fortunately, a lot of our investors, even with impact partners, will give the money as a grant, meaning that they're not expecting to get a return on their investment. So that's the thing about documentaries, is if you're lucky enough to get people who believe in your project, they'll give you the money as a grant, and then you won't have to worry about getting your money back.
One important thing I forgot to mention is, so in addition to the 16 investors, equity investors that have an ownership stake, is that it also is made through the support of countless other people that donated. And we have those donations through the incredible Film Independent. So we had our fiscal sponsorship through Film Independent. But to the question, the film hasn't come out yet. It comes out on December 5th in New York, December 12th in LA. So we will hopefully become profitable if you guys buy tickets. So please tell your friends and buy tickets. Yeah, so the question was, how did we approach people to donate? It really just starts with, understanding the story and what we're pitching, I think, in so many ways. It's always important, and this was one of your earlier questions as well, is how do you talk to investors? How do you talk to philanthropists? How do you talk to people that will donate? It starts with, first of all, do your homework. Of anyone that you're going to sit down with for a meeting is, just show that you have come prepared of who the person is, what their interests are. And so if I'm going to sit down with someone that I think might be interested in donating, I would look at maybe some other causes or, interests that they might have, so that I can speak to why this project fits into that model, and so that I can be a bit more targeted. I mean, generally with this film, it has many different themes. And so for each of the people that we'd approach, whether it was a nonprofit or an individual philanthropist, is we would really highlight, this is where your money goes. And the beauty of Film Independent is, once you take that money and it is then becomes tax deductible as part of that donation, is that we would then be prepared of, not only are you supporting a story that speaks to a cause that you care about, but then you get that wonderful write-off at tax time. So it's a twofer, is being able to speak to both the financial implications but also the impact implications.